Dinesh D'Souza and Alex O'Connor had a pretty heated exchange regarding the veracity of the Bible. Did it contradict itself? Are there places in there that it contradicts themselves? Can we trust the Bible? I'm going to look at this. I wanted to take a quick look at this because it was very interesting, and you'd think I would fall on the side of Dinesh D'Souza, but I don't exactly, and we're going to see why. Here we go.
Another New Testament writer says that the family had traveled to Egypt. I don't think this is an attempt at metaphor or allegory, as I would say of Genesis. Whether you think that is or not, I would say that in the case of the Gospels, we can agree that on at least some instances, this is a clear attempt at mundane history. This is not an attempt at writing some kind of metaphor to explain a truth that's otherwise unknowable to the human mind. It's a very straightforward attempt to record what actually happened, and they contradict each other.
Okay, before we keep going, there are 4 Gospels, the canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew, Mark, and John, they just write it as they go. They just say, this is how it is. The only one that even gives us an explanation of why they're doing it is the Gospel of Luke, the author of Luke. And he is a doctor, from what we can gather. He was a physician. He traveled with Paul. But at the beginning of Luke's gospel, he writes this, chapter 1, verse 1, inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile a narrative of the things that have been accomplished among us, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word have delivered them to us. It seemed good to me also, having followed all things closely for some time past, to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, that you may have certainty concerning the things you have been taught. All right, he's the only one that tells us why he's even setting out to put pen to paper. But let's continue, because you would think I would be on the side of Dinesh and arguing for there are no contradictions in the Bible. But Dinesh doesn't say that exactly. He kind of acquiesces to this proclamation by Alex saying there are contradictions. But let's continue.
They contradict each other because they're written by 4 different people.
Sure.
So let me ask you this: if God were writing it, I'm quite sure He would have written it once. You would need 4.
Sure.
Okay?
So some of them are wrong then.
No. Okay. So when you say they're wrong, let's consider Luke's gospel for a minute.
Yep.
Luke is a medical doctor. Luke is not present at the events being described.
Mm-hmm.
Luke is virtually in the position of Thucydides writing the Peloponnesian War. Now, Thucydides did fight in the war, but in most of the events described by Thucydides in the Peloponnesian War, he wasn't there.
Making them very unreliable, right?
No, on the contrary. It is, in fact, the most reliable account of the Peloponnesian War that historians have.
Let's not say that it is reliable, though.
No, it is. What I'm trying to say is that when you're talking about historicity, and you're talking about historicity now in the ancient world, you have to recognize that these people are not approaching it as modern historians. Luke is going around it.
So Dinesh, he says that he is not a biblical scholar. He's not claiming to be a biblical scholar in when he's doing this. He has more just philosophical arguments and why he argues for the existence of God. He uses that. He doesn't get into the nitty-gritty of the Bible. There are things that Alex calls out because Alex is very versed in the Bible, and he says verse by verse, this says here, this says this over there. They don't line up. And Dinesh doesn't even know at all what he's talking about in some instances. And when we get to the gospel writers, I like Dinesh's kind of approach in a sense that he's kind of coming at it with maybe a layman's term in this of just like someone reporting the news and a witness to an event. Not if everybody sees a car crash, they're not all going to say, if they're looking at it from all different perspectives, they're not going to say the exact same thing. But then some people say, well, the Bible, they're all using the same source, so they are colluding, they're getting together, everything says the exact same thing. But then at the same time, they're saying there's contradictions in it. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Because what Alex says about the contradictions in one part as opposed to the other, Dinesh, he acquiesces. He said that there are contradictions. I would say there are not. And as history unfolds, we always find out that something explains something further. There are things that seemingly contradict. I agree with that. When we talk about history, in the beginning of Luke's gospel, when he talks about governors in place and the census happening at Jesus' birth, that we don't have corroborating evidence of outside the Bible to defend it and kind of uphold it and support it yet. There's some things that we might not have exactly, but we always, it seems like people put the Bible on one table and say, like, elevate it and then they don't treat other historical works the same way that they treat the Bible. And the Bible itself is a historical work. The guys didn't sit down and say, "I'm writing the Bible, everyone. Here we go." Luke didn't just say, "All right, you got me on camera. I'm going to start writing the Bible." No, he was writing just an account of the life he witnessed from the people he gathered kind of information from. So it would be different if they all just said the exact same thing, which they don't. Well, I want to continue.
So let me ask this very, very straightforwardly then.
Okay.
Luke says that after the birth of Jesus, the family fled to Egypt. Matthew says that they went to the Jerusalem temple. Are they both correct, or is one of them wrong?
Who the heck cares? I mean, look.
Okay. Well, first of all, Dinesh is just going with like, who cares? We don't need to get into the minutia, like the very granular thinking details of everything of what it's saying. I would say that, yeah, we do. The Bible should not contradict. God is, if he is who he is and the Bible is the word of God, it shouldn't contradict itself. But that's not going to destroy my faith if someone points out something that seems like it contradicts it. Because my faith isn't like that. Our interpretation right now and how we see the Bible, and we have all the manuscripts, we don't have the very first things that they wrote. We don't have the autographas of what came from the gospel writers' hands. We have copies of a copy of a copy of a copy. But having so many copies, we can get to kind of what it said at the very beginning when it was first penned. But Alex saying that there is no contradiction. I mean, Alex saying there is contradictions between like Matthew and Luke regarding the birth narrative. Why? Because if Jesus was born, why do they either have to go to Egypt or they go to the temple? First of all, the narratives of Matthew and Luke are different times. Matthew is like, let me make sure I get this straight. Matthew is when Jesus is a little bit older. When you see Jesus as born, you don't see him being swaddled in a manger or put in just being right when he was born. You see the Magi coming, which is within 2 years after his birth. So they're different time frames. Luke is rather when Jesus is actually born, because the shepherds are the ones who show up. So then within 2 years time frame, they could have went to the temple and went to Jerusalem. And then in Matthew's gospel, what he renders is they fled to Egypt whenever the Magi came, and then they were told in a dream to flee to Egypt. And that's what happens. They're talking about 2 different times. It's not the exact time, day or date that this is all happening. So I had to point that out. This is very, very good exchange between these guys. I just want to wrap it up with one last thing with them.
Well, I do, and so we're listening to a debate about what the Bible is true.
Let me say why what you care about is not only trivial, but indicates a kind of unwillingness to try to get what the text is trying to communicate.
I'll tell you why I don't think it's trivial. Because I think that the reason why Luke may have invented the flight to Egypt, well, he tells us. Luke says, when he records the flight to Egypt, and then they return from Egypt, he says, this is so that we can fulfill the prophecy from Hosea chapter 11, out of Egypt I shall call my son. Now, in Hosea, God is talking here about the nation of Israel.
Okay. All right. I want to wrap it up with this, because this is the verse that Dinesh is not aware of. He doesn't know about this prophecy that Matthew, and I think Alex had it wrong. It was Matthew who uses this verse because the biblical authors, they don't have an American mindset that is like heavily influenced by Greek thought and linear thinking and just thousands of years of Western culture. This is 2,000 years ago. They don't have that same, it's not the same type of culture. They see the world is more secular. It repeats over and over. It's not like a one long line happening. It's something happens followed by a greater fulfillment. And the authors of the New Testament, they were Jewish. Luke wasn't Jewish, but he was more than like, I argue he's proselyte. He was a proselyte, formerly a Gentile, became Jewish, but he could have just been a Gentile, but he's not just a full-blooded Jew. But there are arguments between that Matthew has the gospel. Let me see if I get this straight. The gospel writers, that they were just thinking in this a prophecy in the Old Testament says this, here's the fulfillment, stamp, boom, there we go. You got it. No, it's rather they're interpreting, they're pulling out of kind of like hints of what is happening in the Old Testament, and it's fully more revealed in the New Testament. A lot of things catch people off guard. All right. All right, so if you've enjoyed this video, hit this link, and I will see you all on the other side.